Meanwhile, according to our Brian Windhorst, there seems to be a view among various NBA people that the Warriors organization is arrogant. Windhorst telling True Hoop podcast, I can't tell you how many times in the last 4 or 5 months, whether it's agents or executives or whomever, coaches, there's this reference, well, they're light years ahead, so they'll be fine. So the light years reference, that stems from Warriors owner Joe Lacob's comments earlier this year to the New York Times saying the team was, quote, light years ahead of every other team. Stephen A., is the Warriors' arrogance justified?
No, it is not. It's not justified at all. And the reason why is because somebody else in Cleveland are the reigning defending NBA champions, not the Golden State Warriors. I won't say who, but there are a couple of individuals entrenched closely within the Warriors organization that literally told me to my face, they blamed, I'm sorry, not to my face, on the phone. They literally blamed arrogance for losing the championship this year. They felt that the team was feeling itself a little bit too much, and as a result, it ultimately ended up catching up with them. From a talent perspective, they have every reason to feel the way that they feel if you're just looking at individual ability. But the last time I checked, that's not how champions view things. The end outweighs all means. And if the end result doesn't end up being ideal, then you have no business being arrogant, and it's not justified. They lost the NBA Finals. They lost the NBA Finals after being up 3-1. To LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James and them went at them in Game 5. Even though Draymond Green was suspended, I still to this day contend that LeBron James instigated that, but that's no big deal. The bottom line is it clearly was a brilliant strategy on his part. When he got physical with Draymond, and then Draymond, the kick, and then LeBron got suspended, and then obviously Andrew Bogut ended up getting hurt in Game 5. Iguodala was hurt by Game 6 and pretty much close to no good for Game 7. So Cleveland had a lot of luck on its side, just like Golden State had luck on its side when they won the championship for the first time when they beat Cleveland. But in the end, what it comes down to is that you were up 3-1. You had a 2-time reigning league MVP as your star. You had the best shooting backcourt in the history of basketball. Draymond Green had returned for game 6 and 7. And you still were not able to close the deal. There is no reason on God's green earth for the Golden State Warriors to be arrogant. A matter of fact, they should be quite annoyed that they're not sitting here as reigning 2-time defending NBA champions right now. The last point that I want to make is this, and I want to call out this show, First Take right now, Sports Center right now, ESPN right now. That damn photo of Kevin Durant and Steph Curry hugging one another. I totally understand it was after the Western Conference Finals when Oklahoma City blew a 3-1 lead to Golden State, and Golden State ended up winning the series. But in light of the things that followed subsequently, meaning Kevin Durant going to Golden State, that is not a photo Oklahoma City wants to see. It is certainly not a photo I want to see. I'm not talking about them hugging each other now that they're in the same uniform. I'm talking about them hugging each other that day, in that moment. Because now that we reflect on it, there we go. I told y'all not to show the damn thing. I actually don't want to see it right now. Now I'm getting ticked off. Because when I see something like that, it makes it
show it again. Show it again.
It's so sweet. It's such a special moment.
That come into my mind. There's questions that, look, I'm not going to get into it because I'm going to be nice. But I'm going to tell y'all, when I see that photo,
which
there
photo?
Are questions
Show it
that
again,
enter
please.
my mind. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to go there.
It makes your mind
because
wander.
I'm in a good mood.
I get
I'm
it.
in a good mood. But
Collusion.
Max, when
Yes.
I see that photo, Max,
it smells
there
a
are
little?
things that enter my mind that I would rather not say.
Well, look,
And I'm gonna leave it at
the
that.
Joe Lacob tweet rubbed people the wrong way because light years ahead in the NBA could be, what does he mean, 18 months ahead? And at the time, it looked like he was right. Well, they'll win the championship this year. There are other teams as talented, but they don't match up exactly as well. How do you really match up with, forget about Steph for a second, what about Draymond Green and play 5 out like that and defend it and try to keep up with them? And do you have Karl Anthony Towns playing that position or something? Who do you get that can kind of... So, yeah, there are teams with much talent, but they weren't organized and structured the same way. And maybe it would have taken a season or two to catch up. But they got their comeuppance that season. They didn't even win the championship last year. So you see where they're cut down a little bit to size. And you can see the arrogance if you look at Steph Curry's behind-the-back pass late in the fourth quarter that he throws out of bounds. I mean, that's a casual kind of or careless, obviously, play at that moment in the game. Just get the ball to who you need to get to. Don't do anything crazy. Don't be arrogant. Don't be casual in that moment. The greatest half-court offense in the history of the game, by the numbers, doesn't score in over the last 4.5 minutes of the fourth quarter of Game 7 in a tie game. They don't score. I mean, they were humiliated. They got their comeuppance. So you say, aha, can't be arrogant now, except that they have created the kind of atmosphere in Golden State, the kind of culture on that team that has other stars wanting to play with them. So they land the biggest available fish in Kevin Durant. He wants to swim in that pond. I mean, like, so you say arrogant. Yeah, they won 73 games, had an historic collapse to lose very close in 7 games to the latest iteration of a LeBron James super team. And then what do? They reload with Kevin Durant and really don't lose anything nearly as significant as what they gained. Would you be a little arrogant? Yeah. I don't see how you avoid that. Maybe the Spurs could avoid it, but who else?
Like I said, ultimately, how you finish is what matters most. It usurps any and all things. And we are sitting here today with the Cleveland Cavaliers as the reigning, defending NBA champions. That means despite a 73-9 all-time regular season record, despite a 2-time league MVP, despite the greatest shooting backcourt in the history of basketball, despite the popularity and the salivation on the part of the public and the television networks who just clamor, in their direction, they ended up short. They got all the sizzle, but they were not the ones who ended up with the gold. And if you don't have the gold, you have no business being arrogant. Plain and simple.
Yeah, but that was last year. This is this year, and they just got KD.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. That's now.
It's a new team.
That wasn't last year. I'm saying that wasn't a new game. Please, you lost. And throughout this entire season, until next June comes around, you still will have lost. The Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James, with Kyrie Irving, with Kevin Love, with Tristan Thompson, with Tyronn Lue as the coach, are the reigning, defending
Stephen
NBA
A., you
champions.
lose arguments
Not
on this show
Golden
every
State.
day. You're just as confident for your next argument.
Oh.
Your arrogance doesn't go
all know
anywhere.
better than that. All everybody talks about right now is how you lying to the American people. I mean, are you kidding me? I haven't lost a debate to you yet. I'm still waiting.
Just lost that.
Maybe you'll force me to stop. I'm hoping you'll provoke me so I can stop actually taking a light on you. I really am.
This is me with one hand behind my back. Wait till the NFL season starts.
Please. This ain't boxing, baby. This ain't boxing.
All right. Up next, a subject we do not take lightly. Penn State will be honoring former head coach Joe Paterno at an upcoming game. Is this a bad idea for the school in light of everything that's happened there? We react to that when we come back. To formally honor former head coach Joe Paterno for the first time since his firing nearly 5 years ago. The ceremony will take place during the Nittany Lions' September 17th game against Temple. This according to the university. Paterno finished his career as the winningest coach in FBS history with 409 wins, but he was unceremoniously fired in November 2011 in wake of the Jerry Sandusky child sex abuse scandal. He died 2 months later, and a statue outside the stadium was removed the following summer. Stephen A., do you have a problem with Joe Paterno being honored?
Without question. He should not be honored. And I agree with my colleague, my esteemed colleague, Reese Davis, when he said that the university comes across as incredibly tone deaf. This is a disgrace. There's no other way to slice it. And let me say this about folks who support Joe Paterno. Let's understand that he made Penn State what it is in terms of putting their name on the map. He was the coach for 46 years there. Brought national championships to that university. We all know what he accomplished. We all know that in terms of the money poured into the program, it had practically everything to do with Joe Pa. That cannot be ignored. But the reason why you take this hardline stance against him is because of the seriousness of the things that took place under his watch and how little he did about it. We're talking about a guy in Jerry Sandusky who is an absolute scum of the earth, who was sentenced from 30 to 60 years in prison because of decades of child abuse, the residue of that. This is the former defensive coordinator for Joe Paterno. This is the same defensive coordinator that somebody came to Joe Paterno and told him about what Jerry Sandusky had done. This is the same Jerry Sandusky that one of Joe Paterno's, or I don't know whether it was, I keep forgetting whether it was a coach or an assistant coach or, somebody that was an intern or whatever, had seen Jerry Sandusky literally sodomizing a youngster and had told Joe Paterno about that. And Joe Paterno alerted the proper authorities. And here's what the people of Penn State don't realize with all the bloviating that they do in support of him. Essentially, you're saying he was the institution. He meant that much to us. He was that impactful. You're not realizing that you're making the case against Joe Paterno better than any of us ever could. Why? Because even though we know that Joe Paterno he wasn't the one committing child abuse or anything like that, the fact of the matter is that he could have done more and elected not to because it wasn't the priority to him that it should have been. This is the same Joe Paterno that, according to reports, the president once came to his house to fire him. Joe Paterno threw the man out of his house and said, "I'm not going anywhere." Okay, that's how much power Joe Paterno had. You couldn't just get rid of him because he was that influential, that powerful, and he wasn't going to go anywhere until he damn well felt like it. So if you had come to him and said Ohio State was cheating or Michigan State or Michigan was doing something under the table and it was affecting his football program, somehow, some way, he would have done something about it then. But you did nothing about Jerry Sandusky. Even when he was not your defensive coordinator, he was still allowed to have an office on campus and, at least figuratively, if not literally, use it as a recruiting tool to ingratiate himself with youngsters he would ultimately abuse. There was something that Joe Paterno could have done about this. He did not. That's why his statue was removed. It's why the Board of Trustees ultimately axed him as the coach. And that cannot be escaped. He is not Jerry Sandusky. He is not the despicable, reprehensible lowlife that should be under the jail and the key should be thrown away and he should be laid down there with the sodomites. That's not who Joe Paterno is. That's Jerry Sandusky. But Joe Paterno is an iconic figure who was incredibly influential, who was negligent in his duties to use that influence to get rid of a serial abuser and pedophile. That is not somebody you celebrate at any turn. You leave him alone, you let him rest in peace, but what you don't do is crop up memories of him to try and celebrate him. He neutralized that with his inaction, and there is no excuse for Penn State to take this path. It is despicable, it is tone deaf, it is embarrassing, and they need to be called out on it. They should be ashamed of themselves. They really should.
To quote Mark Antony from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, "The evil that men do live after them, the good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Joe Paterno." It's not that the good is wiped away by the bad in Joe Paterno's case. It's that they are weighed. And in the balance, the bad outweighs the good here, as much good as he did. There are so many young lives devastated. Listen to an investigative report by Louis Freeh, the former director of the FBI, on July 12th. Here's Paterno's role in the Sandusky scandal. The report concluded that Paterno and other officials, but as Stephen A., you eloquently made the case, Paterno had an enormous amount of influence and power there. Quote, failed to take any steps for 14 years to protect the children who Sandusky victimized. Now here, this is not just an issue of Penn State doing something like actively taking down a statue or a name off a library, which was the right thing to do. That's something you actually have to go out and do. You have to change something that's there. There's nothing there right now. The university is intending to do something new to honor him. That's outrageous. We're not here even debating, well, should something stay or should it change? We're saying, should you change the status quo at the moment to further honor Paterno? Given the events with Jerry Sandusky, given Paterno's, at the very least, alleged inaction, well, it's certainly inaction for the most part, but how much he knew, there seems for many to be reason to believe he knew enough that he could have done more. It's not good enough. I mean, all the good is not good enough to outweigh that. And he, you know, I don't take pleasure in it, but Joe Paterno has no business being honored here. Certainly not for them to take, for lack of a better word, proactive steps to initiate some kind of new honor. That's outrageous.
They're trying to convince us. They're not trying to convince us. They're trying to make sure that we remember the good that he did. What they don't understand is that the good that he did was for Penn State. But his negligence led to such disgusting results on a part of Jerry Sandusky. It assisted in its inactivity, in its absence, in its negligence. It assisted Jerry Sandusky to commit some of the most vile acts we can imagine.
Can you imagine, Stephen A., can you imagine being the parent? Can you imagine being the parent of a child who was victimized after Paterno was made aware of what was happening, after the fact, and there were many? Can you imagine being that parent?
I don't care if he won the national championship every year. The fact that he turned a blind eye to these kids getting molested, and I'm glad that Penn State's moved on, but I'd like to know how these victims feel. This makes me sick. It's sick, and I'm just reading a tweet. It's so fitting. Joe Paterno to be honored with a moment of silence, something he was really good at.
Yes, that's a great tweet, actually.
I love it.
A moment of silence, something he was great at. He was silent. And listen, I feel bad for his family because his son came on the show, but Max, before you arrived, Molly, even before you arrived, his son actually came on the show, you know, and you know, trying to fight on his behalf, and they were engaged in legal action against the NCAA, if I recall correctly. But listen, listen, you can't blame the Paterno family for coming to the defense of their dad, because they'll say we don't know all the facts, and there are a lot of things that they don't want to believe, and there may be things that they know that we don't know. We respect that. But in the end, based on what has been reported, based on what we've learned, the level of negligence on the part of Joe Paterno, the best thing you can do for him is just let him rest in peace. Don't even bring up his name anymore.
That's
because
right.
Inevitably, he is associated with Jerry Sandusky, as vile as Sandusky is, because of how powerful Paterno was and how he did not use it to eradicate everything that was Jerry Sandusky is criminal in and of itself.
Now,
no escape.
I think there is a lesson here, by the way. Even if you think you're doing right by something, an organization, an institution, a group, by sweeping something under the rug, that's not usually the way it turns out. That only makes it worse. And had had Joe Paterno truly had a clear thought about what was best for the institution that he was perhaps trying to protect, if, as many of us believe, he could have done more, then he made the wrong choice by sweeping it under the rug, if in fact that's what he did. The right choice would have been to shine a light on it. Sunlight is the best detergent, and in this case, it could have prevented multiple tragedies.
As soon as he heard about this, he needed to dead the whole thing.
Of course.
That's what needed to happen.